join us shortly online. He is former candidate for St. Peter. He's also a renowned PE teacher as well. Good night. National coach as well. Thank you. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. Welcome. Thank you. Yes, 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 yes. I hope everybody enjoyed the day today. Yeah, the day long, long, but long.
Tiring. I was about to say tiring. I
Yeah.
don't
Tiring.
want to
Yeah.
say,
All right. Well, first, Damien, I'm going to start with the gentleman to my left. Damien. Yes, sir. So tell us a bit about your background and your involvement in sports and national development. Tell us a little bit more.
Well, as everybody knows me as an attorney at law, but before I was an attorney at law, I was heavily involved with sports.
Mhm.
I probably my most renowned time was probably when I was in the Barbados Defense Force Sports Program. And during that time, as I told everyone before, my first qualification I had achieved in there. But that qualification was me being IWS certified as a athletics coach. Like the very first qualification. Before I even got a CXC, I was IWS certified. I went on to do the sports administration certificate that was under the auspices of the International Olympic Committee. I got a scholarship to do physical education through the sports program. When I left there, I then went on to do the professional diploma in advanced sports management. And I taught PE for a brief time at Bradley Adams Memorial School for about a year.
So you mentioned athletics. What was your marquee?
The marquee for me was the sprints. At one time, I started out at 1 and 2, but then when I joined the Defense Force Sports Program, I was transitioned into 2 and 4.
2 and 4.
Yeah,
Okay. 2 and 4. And all those are very difficult races.
grueling
Very
races,
difficult.
grueling races.
So that's a little bit about yourself. So we'll stick on you. I'm gonna continue to ask you the question. So, what inspired your interest in the connection between sports and the country's growth? What initially did that?
What initially did that for me was because I recognized that sports was a vehicle for socioeconomic advancement. And not only that, if you could capture the young mind and show them, well, listen, you can be the next Oba, you could be the next Andrea, these premier sprinters and hurlers that come through that Barbados seem to produce very well. You can find yourself not only on the world stage, but you could probably become a national hero. And you could probably take someone, you know, out of the realm of finding themselves going into probably a bit more deviant behavior. So I felt that if I could capture minds, mold them, get them into sports, then we could probably produce young people who can make the country proud.
That's very interesting. I think that's something that you should always aspire to do, especially with the younger generation as well too.
Especially,
So
yeah.
I'm gonna bring Dr. Dawn Marie now. Just, that's okay. You're gonna get it. So
I'm sorry.
this full.
Thank
That's
you.
no problem. Yes, no problem. Yes. So I mean, sports psychologist.
Mhm.
Marie, how do you think sports contribute to a nation's development? That's beyond entertainment.
I think something that we've been pushing for heavily, something that's never happened in Barbados, particularly when it comes to making a serious cash investment in sport. I think when government begins to see sport as a key pillar of socioeconomic development, and only then in and through policy will we then be able to see the, I guess, community buy-in and the national buy-in that we need. So it's not so much so a case where, it starts from the top and filters down. It is where government has to go now to communities to find out how communities want to move sport forward, and particularly how persons within the communities, persons of influence. I know you mentioned Alwyn Babb, and he's online with us today, but how can persons like Alwyn Babb, having raised generations of champions in this country in the sports of netball and track and field, how can a person like Alwyn Babb, lend to policy development in, let's say, a parish like St. Peter, The government has utilized Parish Speaks, and I think they've touched every parish, but particularly when it comes to engaging persons in sport and that discourse around sport and sport development. Perhaps there needs to be more of a buy-in to, across the island to find out what people want from sport, and then government actually going back and kind of revising the green paper that they would have laid, to ensure that the approach that we are now taking is more evidence-based and particularly more focused to our demographic and what we intend to do as a country in building the economy.
I'm trying to see if we have Alwyn Babb online, because I want to bring him into the conversation as well too. Mr. Babb, just see if we have him. No problem. I think we're dealing with that technical challenge. We just definitely. So yes, no problem. I think that we will move on. No, some more questions, obviously. So, in your opinion, what is the biggest benefit a country gains from investing in sports?
Socioeconomic growth, for sure. Because if you're going to piggyback on the policy of tourism, sports tourism is a very lucrative investment in itself. I think that it earns in the world somewhere between 400 and 600 billion dollars. That is an industry that we can tap into, because I believe that while we are small, we have the location, the facilities. We can develop the facilities. We can package a unique offering to individuals who wants to come here and invest in or experience types of sports that we can offer. So not only would it benefit the country in regards to, like, when you invest inwards in its people, you can also outwardly improve the profile of the country itself. So then not only would you be improving tourism as a product, you will be improving sports on a whole. And that development would then trickle down now to, like, our youth, investors, the public sector, and even the private sector.
So, Dawn, spend a little bit, expand sports tourism.
I think one of the critiques that we've had, and it's interesting that Fanus would have mentioned it, is that whenever I lay my grand plans, even as we plan behind closed doors for sport, the challenge is always, but Barbados is so small. How can we? Barbados is so small. And I think the last time we would have had this discussion would have been around the time of the estimates. And truly, when we consider the fact that, yes, Barbados is small, but as a Caribbean community, we have CARICOM, for example. And, in the capacity of Barbados being one of the members of CARICOM, I definitely do feel it's to a point where the Caribbean as a collective community have to decide where they see sport and where they want sport to go. So it's not so much so selling Barbados as a destination for a particular sport. It is how can we as Barbados set ourselves aside, but then allow our other Caribbean brothers and sisters to shine in their respective sports. So one would say that Jamaica is the home of track and field. Some people would say that Jamaica, again, or Trinidad, is the home of football. Every country has its own culture. I definitely do think every country has excelled. And unfortunately, St. Lucia, Grenada, and some of the islands smaller than us have gone on to excel at the world level, bagging Olympic medals, and we're still behind. And equally, I think that when we come together and decide that this is the product that the community wants to put forward to the world, in terms of letting them know that we are not left behind, that's where we have to kind of find ourselves. And I say this because I've obviously worked abroad, worked at the highest level in academia, in sport. And it was the hardest sell, being in rooms and trying to get colleagues to see the value of the Caribbean, So a lot of the policy kind of focus in terms of even student recruitment tends to be focused on the Asia, sub-Saharan Africa. And it's like, why not the Caribbean? And, the perception is that we are too small, not that we're too small to be of value, but we're too small in the sense that we don't know or haven't tried to make ourselves big. And unless we can collectively come together and put together a product that people want to buy or buy into, and I think we're going to continue to struggle in that front.
So you had some experiences overseas.
Mhm.
How far are we from that? Even just the framework
Yeah.
of having a proper.
We're very far behind, but again, based on, I don't want to say based on the research that I've undertaken, because I don't want to make the discussion too academic, but as I would have highlighted previously, all it took in terms of funding, for example, England as a country, well, no Team GB, was one government to come in and say, this is what we want to do with sport. And I think the surplus in funding came particularly in British sport after the London 2012 Olympics. And if you Google now, you could go straight to the website and see the allocations of funding in past years in terms of GB sports. And, most countries outside of the Caribbean tend to be transparent in terms of letting the public know where the funding is coming from, particularly where it's allocated. The Freedom of Information Act allows normal citizens to access, essentially where the government is allocating funding. So you could request publicly, to know exactly how monies are being spent. But if you look at the allocation for sport across GB Sport, you will see that there was a large lump sum invested for the London 2012 Olympics and then a steady increase, Comparing that to the US now, I think there was a cash injection of about 330 million going into this Olympic cycle alone. And this just goes to show the magnitude of how governments in other parts of the world, see sport and value sport. And I think I even went as far as researching, how the EU kind of puts a dollar figure on the benefit of sport and how it profits the economy. And every agenda that you will see championing, global development, sport is at the top of the list, but unfortunately in the Caribbean it is not, and we're very far behind.
That's not good.
Yeah.
I want to bring Mr. Babb. Mr. Babb. Good night, everybody. It's good to be finally here. Okay. You can hear me? You can hear me? I can hear everyone quite clearly. Beautiful,
Yes, we
beautiful,
can hear
Mr.
you.
Babb.
Yes, we can hear
How
you.
are you doing, Mr. Babb? A bit tired, rushing around, trying to. I was with sport this evening, so I ran in to make sure I was on time. Still didn't make it, but I'm here. And I'm hoping that we're not making sport this evening. But we're
Nope. Nope.
Right. We're having a decent conversation here. Yes, I have started sport and national development. So I'm gonna move on to you now, Mr. Babb. So tell us a bit about your background and involvement in sports and national development, please. For as long as I can remember, I was involved in the community sports in St. Lucie. First of all, strange enough, my first love was football, and I began coaching that at a very young age, even before I left school. And then once I got into secondary school, I took up track and field quite seriously and began coaching at the Freedom Striders Track and Field Club when Mr. Level went away to do some studies. And I never looked back. Went on to the Lester Vaughan School, and the rest is history. We have a number of outstanding athletes there. Those two young people sitting there next to you came under my hand at some point in time, whether as a coach or a competitor. Domri has some good stories about being a competitor on the other side.
And we worked together.
Like the Lester Vaughan School
Yeah,
as
we
well.
worked together. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So it's been a long 30 plus years in this field as well. And your discussion, we're always talking about what sports can do at the top. But how do we get those persons at the bottom, at the nursery stage, to buy into sports as an industry and sports as being very important to the development of this country? And I believe that we have to look at some structures within our primary and secondary schools, and we start there, and we can see it flourish into something bigger at the national level. I think you have a delay. No, they lost transmission. I think they lost connection with me.
Allocating funding so you could request publicly, to know
That's all right.
exactly how
Ready
monies are
again?
being spent. But if you look at the allocation for sport,
Yes.
across
apologize for that
every sport,
break
you will
in
see that
transmission.
Working now?
Yes, I believe that we are up and running again. So, Damien,
Yes, please.
in your opinion, what is the biggest benefit a country gains from investing in sports?
I always say that a country's biggest benefit is how it impacts its people. Our people are human resource, and I believe that sports will impact our people in a way that not only does it help them to develop, I guess, socioeconomically, but it brings us together to show that we can be a athletes. Worldwide events that are catered to the international audience, that people say, listen, I want to come to Barbados and I want to watch that live. And then not only that, but a national development program in sports that is the envy of the international community. Imagine that Barbados could be a world leader in sports entertainment, sports media, sports development, whichever area, sports tourism. And then not only does that impact us as a people, but it puts a sense of pride into us that say that not only is it our pride, but it's our industry as well. So I believe that it can develop us to a point that where that people, Barbadian people, can benefit socioeconomically, and not only that, lift us and lift our culture and infuse a sporting culture that can be, I guess, felt from as young as the nursery level all the way to tertiary and beyond, and up to senior games and so on. So that is what I believe.
So I gotta ask you a question now. Personally, when you were younger, how did it impact?
Sports was probably my most favorite thing to take part in, more so than anything else, because when I came up, just being involved in sports, that gave you a sense of pride. I know that watching other individuals like who came before me compete at a certain level, like my PE teacher back at CP, Pedro Hines, right? He was a sprinter. I think he had went to Olympics. Hadley Hines had went to Olympics. He was also a teacher. God rest his soul, rest in peace. These are individuals that I had looked up to, and it impacted me in such a way where that I told myself, I want to be the next Oba.
Mhm.
I want to be somebody that I can make my country proud. And if I could just qualify for maybe a games like Carifta and beyond, I could bring home something not only to my country, but to the region as well, and put the world on notice that the Caribbean is here. The Caribbean is here when it comes to sports, and that we will not be denied and we will not be ignored. So that's how it felt for me.
Our discipline. That sports, you have to train hard.
Yep.
For sure. Lots of sweat and tears. So in terms of discipline, that level of discipline that you must input, that you must have, how did that then translate into your work and into anything else that you would have done that you would need discipline?
When I was in the sports program, because that was stationed inside the Defense Force, and that in itself is an entity of discipline. So not only did you have that discipline that's expected in the military, being involved in sports, you had to also be mentally strong and disciplined in regards to, because I remember one time the Defense Force had put on some CXC classes for us, but we used to train in the morning and train in the evening. And after the morning session, you don't want to see nothing. You don't want to see anything. We used to come home, we used to be so knackered, come back in the base, sleep till lunch, get up, eat, sleep again, and then go and train. But those classes were in the afternoon. And I remember that we had just came in and fell asleep. And I just heard these footsteps just coming through the bark room. And it was our staff sergeant at the time. He just came and he peeped, he looked at the bunks, went out, called the fall in. And he was like, y'all have classes now? Don't y'all have classes now? So here we can tell me now. This is your first morning. Don't get to classes, I come in and see y'all sleeping again. Y'all gonna get some hours, right? That was punishment or hours. So then you had to know, get that mental discipline that you had to look past being tired and get up and focus on your books. But in the same sense that you were tired, it kind of strengthened you mentally, because then after a while, even though you were tired and you had to go and study, after just doing that for about a week, it wasn't even a mental block anymore. You actually we came in, got up, went to classes afterwards, came back and trained. So it is not easy in the sense, but there is a higher level of discipline than just getting up and going to work, getting up on time, going to work and coming back home. It is something that you have to mentally prepare yourself for, that you will be times that you will be tired. But if you want to balance the books in between your training and so on, that it is something that you must prepare yourself for. And if you want to get from point A to point B in regards to success in sports, there is a higher level of discipline that comes with it.
Okay, you mentioned the sports program. There was some stipend paid where the sports program was concerned.
Yes, there was a monthly stipend. It wasn't a salary, but it was enough that it helped you with transportation. Sometimes if you wanted to, because the Defense Force, they provided equipment in there as well. They provided training equipment, they provided your track gear, they even provided your track suits, sometimes vitamins and supplements. But if you wanted to get around, and probably there was something else that you saw that you wanted, or even if you wanted to pay for classes on the outside, that stipend used to help a lot.
Okay, well, before we go on, you mentioned the sports program. I'm not asking the government. I am telling the government we need to start back the sports program. I saw the estimates of $1.9 million annually when it was actually a program.
Yeah.
It concluded with the scrap the program in 2018 September.
Yeah.
I'm asking the government, I'm telling the government, we need to restart the program soonest, for sure. No doubt about it. Mr. Babb.
I'm here now again.
Yes, please. Yes, please. I
Yes.
know you played a vital role, obviously, in the development of the two young people on the couch here. On your off, were there good students?
I was privileged to have some people who work hard. There were some of them. I know Fanus, working very hard as an athlete. Dr. Don Marie was always very competitive, offered the challenge. very, very competitive and a tough competitor. And she was training with someone else, but the competition that she provided motivated me as a coach to stay ahead of her and to ensure that somebody was always there to rob her of a first place. Yeah, but we had some good times, and the discipline that Fanus is talking about is very, very, very important for success. And I want us to understand that the not only the discipline for young athletes, but also we have to look at the personnel who are working and the structures we have in place. As I was saying earlier before we were cut off, the structures that we have in place for the development of sport and to see it as as national as important at the national level and within our school setting, especially primary school, we can no longer say it as just physical activity, but the overall development of our children. And we have to get our parents to understand that getting involved in a sports program or sports can lead to a lot of careers, not only as an athlete, physiotherapist, athletic therapist, massage therapist as well. So we need to, at that level as well, when we're talking about education transformation, we have to see where sports fits into that and how important sports will be as part of our educational transformation program.
So, Mr. Babb, what inspired your interest in the connection between sports and the country's development?
First of all, I thought it was a good athlete. But I can, in the days where we had the Christopher Picks and the Abu Worlds, and so therefore you were always down the back of the line, just like those athletes who came along the same time as Hussein Bolt and some of the others at that time. It was very difficult to rise to the top, and because of that era. But I saw the importance of sport as a way to get out the poverty that you were in, to provide an opportunity for study, provide an opportunity for upward mobility, and it offered a sense of discipline and for me as a young person. And then when I saw my involvement in football brought a community from Half Moon 4 and Clinkits Check all together in some good, wholesome rivalry, I knew that I had to get involved in sport at a different level.
I would have asked Damien this question. Dawn, in your opinion, what is the biggest benefit a country gains from investing in sports?
Well, I could tell you, based on my research, the top 3 benefits of a cash investment right now in sport. First will be job opportunities, the creation of jobs. And we could look at it, for example, we hosted the Cricket World Cup last year. Again, we still don't know the funds and the monies that were spent, how they were spent. The government still hasn't been transparent about that with the general public, but we do know that people benefited from employment opportunities. We saw, I would say, I don't want to call it a surge, but obviously there was lots of entrepreneurial activity, persons engaging in, their own pursuits, making their own money in that regard. So job creation is the first benefit. And we all know the state of the economy right now. We know that people are looking for money. We know people need jobs. So even as Fanus mentioned, sport tourism, hosting a major windsurfing tournament, for example. Something that I saw recently in previous years was the Beijing Ninja Showdown.
Yes.
And I think that's quite global. That attracts people from all across the world. So, if we could continue to host events at that level across all sports and continue to attract people to the island, perhaps people would have more work opportunities. The second benefit, believe it or not, will be the increase in physical activity and wellness. And we know that wellness is directly associated with, mental well-being. So you will have a population that's conscious about the benefits of physical activity. Hopefully you will have a more active population. And with a more active population, you should see the decrease in non-communicable diseases. And again, research will show that the more physically active individuals are, the reduction of, non-communicable diseases is a direct result of, engagement in physical activity. So a more active population will be the second benefit. And the third is definitely the social benefit. So when young people, for example, are engaged in sport, you see a reduction in deviant behavior. So something that I've often said in previous weeks to months, with the surge of crime in the country, I've been calling for the government to implement, sport intervention. So ditch the peace program and, trying to tackle it at the roots and actually empower persons within the community who have influence, persons like Mr. Babb and other persons, other names that both guests mentioned, reach out to those people who would have the influence and equip them with the capacity to mentor, the young men and young women in our community to, see if we could have a more community-based intervention to crime as opposed to this person-centered approach to getting people to stop committing crime, So those are the top three benefits. So we have the job creation, so more employment opportunities. We have the physical benefits, increased well-being, increased mental well-being, increased physical activity, and the third being, that level of social and community engagement that would allow each and every citizen to feel as if they're responsible for the country at large.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So, Damien,
Yes, please.
what are some of the infrastructure improvements that have resulted from hosting these big events, these huge events? What are some that you actually saw?
Well, I know recently there was a cricket World Cup here, and all of a sudden roads were being done. That's what I know. Some were being done, and I don't see why we wait till sometimes when these events come here to get these things done. But well, that is just, I guess, part and parcel of certain people's agendas. But what I do see though is that even though when these events come here, there is an improvement on the facilities that host them. But it should not be just how should I say, pigeonholed to just when an event comes here. We should be investing in facilities and facility managers and people who can take care of the infrastructure so that these infrastructures are available all year round. And then you keep adding on and you find different sites and you earmark them for development. And then once you pick these sites out and you develop them, then you have the community will have access to world-class facilities. Could you imagine hosting a FIFA level football event in St. Lucie or maybe in even St. Peter or wherever.
It's interesting that no, go ahead, sorry.
I believe that in every parish we should have world-class facilities, whether it be cricket. It doesn't have to be like to the point of a 60,000 seater stadium, but it could be something that is good enough that it could probably seat close to 5,000. But you can still have that world class event to the point that you can tell yourself that someone can benefit from hosting this here, even if it's just a simple community, a small community, and I believe that every parish should at least have a world-class cricket ground, a world-class stadium in regards to a track, world-class football ground, all types of event place where you can probably host netball, basketball, tennis, wherever. So that is what I believe should happen with each and every single parish.
Infrastructure.
Yeah, I was gonna say that we mustn't have such a myopic view on, infrastructure, because if we look at the games, or Olympic Games being the classic games that we will become familiar with, I don't know if many of you would have seen, after the games leave countries, the state within which infrastructure is left.
Yeah, that's true.
So there's a lot to question about the legacy benefits of large events and, large infrastructure, particularly because, after events move on, the infrastructure is not utilized. And it's funny because, the government is bragging about creating mini stadia. I happen to have the opportunity to see one, drive by one every day. Did not know it was a mini stadia. I just thought that the facility was quite nice, well, very well taken care of. But what's infrastructure without properly utilizing the infrastructure? What's infrastructure without actually having the persons or the staff educated enough to maximize the capacity of this infrastructure? So, if we're having mini stadia, and it is something that I would have been challenging the Barbados Cricket Association on, for example, and I've said it for the past 2 years, cricketers need to be paid. We're in the middle of a domestic season, and some of the grounds have mini stadia. If you are wanting to begin to generate revenue in terms of getting people to spectate and to contribute, charge an admission fee for persons to come and watch. Uplift the level of cricket, make it a lot more competitive. I think it becomes competitive when players are paid, because then fellas can start to say, oh, the men get money. All right, so we coming back out now. You can see some of the best cricketers coming out to the World, some of the best ones that we lost to the 9-to-5s, because, really cricket doesn't pay. So when a man has a family to feed, they have to go to work. So cricket is put on the back burner. So if you decide now to invest, I saw St. Vincent invested St. Lucia, $1 million EC into their domestic T20. So if you see the government now investing $1 million into the BCA League, and then players are able to get a little something with the weekend, or carry home a little bag after the 6 months that they're giving up for the entire season, practically, they're starting in April and going right down to December. So that is actually more like 8 months. Try to find ways to capitalize on the infrastructure so that you improve on the infrastructure from the revenue that the infrastructure has made. Because then you also find, when you get these lump sum cash investments into facilities, and I trust and I hope that when the national stadium is rebuilt, that it is seen hopefully as a facility that can be used to generate its own revenue. I have in my mind what I think it should be, and I have my grand plans for what I would like the stadium to be. I don't intend to share them here, but I know for a fact that if this government has a vision for sport, that vision doesn't have to be seen with the completion of the national stadium. It should be seen now, So I would say so far, the mini stadium, if I had to grade it on a scale from 1 to 10, I'll give it about 2, 3. Just because I like the concept. But up until now, the mini stadia have not been utilized in the way that they should be utilized. So I am not one that will come and sit and say we need infrastructure. No, we need persons educated well enough in sport to understand how to grow the industry first and foremost. And when we have persons educated enough to grow the industry, then one could then begin to consider, which sports need the investment, because unfortunately it will come to a point where some sports may require more investment than others. Football is heavily funded, so is cricket as well. So what about sports like hockey, swimming, all the other sports that don't have the cash injection and to continue to function as other sports would? And how do we then get all sports to an equitable level where then funding can be equally spread across and no sport feels left out in that regard? So infrastructure kind of sits a little bit lower on my agenda. But most definitely, there's a good place to start, I think, at this point.
I wanna ask Mr. Babb. Mr. Babb, sir, so your thoughts on infrastructure improvements.
I am with Armstrong on that point, because this government can say that we're putting up, plan to put up stadia all around, and I saw some plans about 4 tracks, but if you have no plans for usage, if you have no plans on how you're going to equip those stadia to have enough equipment for those persons who are going to be using it, and then those are going to be what we usually call boy elephants, just sitting around the place being idle and going to ruin. But we have to have a plan, a good plan, when we put up those sort of infrastructure around the place. And this is a small island, so I think that more where we zone, where we put those things, but the plan has to be, and management of those stadia has to be one that we pay close attention to. But I want to zero on something that Don said: education and pay. Education and pay.
And staffing too.
And staffing, right.
I'm telling you.
And I want to say it, and I hope that when this government, when the DLP assumes the reins of government, that we see, that we look at how education plays a role in a national development program for sport. At this point, I would take a primary. I am not sure that all primary schools have PE teachers, just solely for PE teachers.
Wow.
I can tell you that.
Uh-huh.
And I would also add to that, Babb,
Yes.
in terms of, we would have raised this during the St. James North by-election with the National Sports Council. So you're building this mini stadia, and even though some of the caretakers for the pavilions and whatnot across the island don't know if they'll have jobs.
That
So
is
who's gonna be staffing the mini stadia? And you are right. A lot of our primary school children, and again, we are breaching some serious international policy when we consider the fact that it is a child's right to play. So if we're sending to school children now, we're sending our children to school and there are no physical education teachers to ensure that they're getting their daily quota of physical activity. We are harming our young people by not giving them the opportunity to engage in sport and physical activity in a substantial way. So I definitely do feel, and I agree with Babb, when we say when the Democratic Labour Party take the reins of government, it is because persons like myself, Fanus, Babb, all know and are very well educated in terms of understanding what this country needs. And I think the government is just at this stage lost for ideas. And somebody even said today, when the Democratic Labour Party now speaks about sport, the government finds something to do. And
of course,
even had a bit of a
yes, you're
joke
right.
about
They come out.
we even had a bit of a joke about it today, because even though they said, oh, well, the National Sports Council will rebrand into Sport Barbados, we have not heard anything
What
about
is the
Sport
plan?
Barbados since the
No.
St. James North by-election.
No.
So even in terms of wanting to know where this government is taking this country pertaining to sport, I personally think that they'll be watching right now and
They should
listening
be.
to what we say.
They should be. They should
And
be.
in another 2 or 3 days, you will see some grand statement being made without any type of evidence to back it up. So
Yeah.
No, I'm
Yes.
glad we made mention of stadium,
I can.
media and stuff. I'm glad we made mention. What is going on with our national stadium? I know it was at phase 1 now.
It's supposed to be completed by July 2026,
July
based on the
2026.
calculations I did. So again, when the demolition was scheduled and the press reached me for comment, and I did give a fair comment, that's when the Minister of Youth, Sport and Community Empowerment rebutted and said, it'll take 26 months to complete. Obviously the demolition did not go as planned. It was planned for April. So perhaps now it was demolished fully in May. So 26 months should put us at August 2026. If you drive around the facility now, you will see that a structure is going up where the netball stadium was.
Yes,
I'm
yeah.
having a think about what exactly is going to be. I can't figure out.
Nobody knows exactly.
Yeah, is it indoor? Is it indoor? Is it outdoor? Like
It was supposed to be indoor. It was supposed to
Yeah.
be indoor, and then we had a change. It was going to be part indoor. I don't know what
it's
there
a very
so
odd
many
looking
changes.
structure, because I have never seen something constructed with the roof going up first. I have a difficulty understanding. The roof is up. The roof is up first, so you could literally see that something is happening.
Right.
But I've never. I've always known buildings to start with the foundation first, And if anything, you put up the shell where the walls may be, and
then put the
the
roof
roof
on
falls
top.
down last. But I don't understand what's happening there right
Do
now.
you get the sense it's all about optics, all about buzzwords, all about
Well,
know?
you see, this is the thing, because one would say that the Democratic Labour Party lost government based on said optics, because the Barbados Labour Party has not really enacted anything that they promised in their manifesto. And I think we made mention of the fact that, they said within 6 months of winning the government, this is what the Barbados Labour Party will do. So I will hope that by now the citizens of Barbados open their eyes and recognize that, optics is just that.
Yeah.
The Barbados Labour Party does a good job of being seen, but as far as the populace seeing their actions in terms of sport, I could tell you, and this is across all sectors, but we're focusing on sport tonight. The action is, close to zero.
because you had a situation where the media, they're going to different locations. So this is going here, that, and we have a stadium, that has been the way it has been for a very long time, a very, very long
And the
time.
Democratic Labour Party built it too.
Whatever. How important was that stadium to the national sports in general?
National sports as a discourse, that stadium was probably the Primera in regards to any types of sports discussion
Of
whatsoever.
Of course.
So a lot of very important cultural things happened at that stadium. Remember the CAC games when I think it was Stephen Jones, Oba, Gabriel Burnett, and Victor Houston won that 4x1. You remember the pride that how it is. I heard people shouting and cheering all the way down from South Central, right? That stadium was basically, you could say that it's synonymous with cuckoo and flying fish.
It's a hub.
It was a hub. It was a hub for sports culture.
Yes.
Culture.
It was a hub for sports culture. I had my very first big sporting events under the tutelage of Babb, nationals.
And don't talk about the football too.
And
some of the football tournaments.
Not only football.
We had those qualifiers against, when
we beat
America.
Costa, when we beat Puerto Rico, one love. I
We
think it
had
was
all
one
of
love.
the yes.
Yeah, listen.
You know what? We're forgetting something though. Does anyone know, Bob? I don't know if you know, but the new stadium does not have a velodrome.
No, they have not planned. I have not heard any plan for cycling.
And
No.
I cannot imagine
Wow.
how with the likes of persons like Barry Ford that would have gone before us. I happen to know a few people in the cycling community as well. And, sometimes when we say, well, people reach out to us, they would love to think that we are making these stories up. But the cyclists really want to know, where do they fit in this new sport development plan? Because if there's no velodrome at the National Stadium, which we were always accustomed to,
Yes, we are.
where is the new velodrome going to be? Is it going to be a facility on its own? If it's a facility on its own, is there going to be a specific kind of plan to develop cycling? Is there going to be a grassroots initiative to get more children cycling? Because believe it or not, all of us probably learned how to ride a bike when we were children because we didn't have tablets to go and sit down and kind of binge on. So you had to go outside and you try to roller skate, you ride a bike, you pitch marbles, all the things that we were accustomed to doing as children. Our children now probably will not benefit from it unless we enforce the benefit from it. So what about cycling? And we're guilty of it too because we sit here we talking about cricket, football, but cycling.
Cycling.
Because I was gonna ask, do we neglect the other sports?
Yeah, we
I
do.
mean,
Absolutely.
we love cricket, no doubt about
Mhm.
it, viewers,
No.
right?
Oh,
But
speak
do
for
we,
yourself.
do we, Mr. Babb, what are your thoughts
Yes,
on it?
no, I think this is what has happened. When you call it neglect, because because of the era of television and the sports and what is associated with international representation, those other team sports, which do not get a chance to get on the international stage, tend to fall behind. Track and field is probably at the top. Then you have the cricket, which is the king of sport here in Barbados. You have football because of you have your teams going out trying to qualify. But then you see the other sports still having a struggle of getting into international competition, and that is why some of the money or most of the money are placed in what we call the grassroots area, or the mass sports like track and field, football, and cricket. And when you're not getting any money for development, and then you're going to suffer even more. But we have to take a decision that all sports matter, and
Yeah.
all sports
All.
matter. We have to take a decision that all sports matter,
That's
that we can encourage, because within a school setting, and I'm a teacher, I always go back there. Our basis for sports as competition starts in the PE class. We expose the children to movement, basic hand-eye coordination, and you never know. And then we introduce them through the National Sports Council program, sports coming into the schools, and they're exposed, and you never know where they end up. And because if you don't take the decision, all sports matter, you may be losing a potential international.
Fabula, you need a consultancy here. Let me call you yet for an consultant pick. Let me tell you, you're dropping real gems.
So,
honestly.
so that is what we need at this point. And I just want to, I'm going to drop another fact here about our educational system. There is no separation, and I want our DLP government to make a separation between physical education, and coaching. When one starts and when the other one finish. Because what we're having within, if we're going to have a national development program, we cannot ask physical education teachers like myself that after a full day of teaching to simply muster enough energy free of cost to carry a after school program. There must be a distinction, and it has come a time where now that we have a CSC program, a CAPE program for physical education, but we have no department in secondary schools known as physical education. And that has to change, and the Democratic Labour Party has to change that, and when they get into office, because people matter.
Not only that, the role of the physical education officer, the little tiny office that they hold at the ministry, and some people eat that job.
Let me stop you there. We have no physical education officer since the passing, the retirement.
Yeah, but I was also gonna say that person kept that role for just about 15 years, 20 years.
Yes, about that. Yes,
and that's something.
We don't have any officer at this point in time, and I am saying that a DLP government must see the difference, because you can't have an education officer for physical primary school, and that same officer deals with secondary school matters. There are unique differences between the two settings.
I was also going to say, Baba, maybe we need to be at the forefront of this. You know, as a Democratic Labour Party, I definitely do feel that sport and physical education need their own, not just department, but need their own policy agenda within the Ministry of Education.
I agree with you.
And I think the Ministry of Education now has been speaking a lot about curriculum reform. I mean, they don't know whether to keep the 11 plus or not. So I don't even trust them.
Let me give you a joke. I was invited to sit on a committee to see how it was education reform or education transfer. Which came first, transformation or reform? Which one was?
No one knows.
It was reform. Came first. And I was invited to sit in the committee with a number of PE teachers to come up with an idea to find out how they had no clue of how we are going to fit physical education and sport into this whole transformation. No clue whatsoever.
Let me tell you.
That's true.
I think that's where we come in, you see, because we've had numerous discussions, and then I don't want to say it is a no-brainer to sound, you know, as if the Democratic Labour Party knows it all, but the Democratic Labour Party certainly knows more than the Barbados Labour Party at this point when it comes to sports. And I think, and I would just offer them a suggestion, again, when you speak about educational reform, I think we need to map our agenda onto a global agenda again. And we know that globally sport is taking economies across the world forward. So we need to look at the global agenda and begin to educate future generations to map onto what is going to drive the world forward. And I think that's where we need to start in terms of educational reform, you see. So particularly with respect to and again, I mentioned sport. If you are wanting to create future generations of not just athletes, because we always speak about the athletes, but sports scientists, myself as the only British Psychological Society chartered and registered sport and exercise psychologist in the Caribbean, they challenged me and my Viva to raise up a generation of sports psychologists in the Caribbean. What about me teaching my 4-year-old daughter, the principles of sports psychology? Not saying I want her to do what I do, but perhaps I could even inspire the younger generation to take up a career in sports psychology, yourself a career in sport coaching, Fanus as a sport manager,
Sports lawyer.
and specifically educate our children to
Yes.
hold these roles within the workforce. And something that I saw over the last few days, we're celebrating the academic excellence of our young achievers for the common entrance, and congratulations to all of the high achievers. But something that I wish that I saw was children who may not have gone to the most prestigious schools being celebrated as well, because we know traditionally a lot of our athletes may not have excelled in the way that people believe excellence or academic excellence should occur at that level, but they've gone on to represent the country at the international level and done well for themselves. So when we consider sport and other professions and other trades and other skills that our young people could learn, perhaps now is the time to look at another focus. Every child is not going to learn and get 100 in maths and 100 in English and
Right.
an A in a composition, and you're set for life. I could tell you, as a young woman with 3 degrees, the people that are making all the money right now are the people who are creative, the people
Yes.
who are
It's true.
excelling, with their bodies. They're using their bodies to full capacity. Sports people use their body to full capacity, and they're some of the richest people in the world. So perhaps even in terms of educational reform, we now need to consider that education goes beyond the classroom, right? So that's just a little tip and pointer that I'm going to throw out there to begin to, incite some form of thought pertaining to, this educational reform and transformation that we are trying to understand from the mouth and the lips of the Barbados Labour Party. But I don't think we've got it all together at this stage.
Before we go on, if you're now joining us, this is the LPTV. We're discussing sports and
Yes.
national development. Yes.
Right. To piggyback on what Dawn and Alwyn was saying, sports in a sense that there are no discussions and even research out there that's saying that the ability to perform at sports is a form of intelligence. The ability to bend the ball, the ability to strike a ball with a bat, the ability to bowl, that is a form
very
of
cerebral.
It is very cerebral. And even with the I when I was a phys ed teacher for the short period that I was, I felt that sometimes that even trying to do my job, I felt that I was kind of like marginalized, wasn't given the respect as a phys ed teacher. I don't know if Mr. Babb could speak to this, but sometimes it felt like if when you were in your space trying to do your job, it was like you were just begging to be recognized.
Yeah.
Because not only do we deal with theory, we deal with the physical aspect of teaching sports. Because it's not as simple as standing up in a classroom and just pointing to a blackboard and saying, well, A plus B plus whatever, or you understand me? But when it comes to teaching sports skills, you have to be very, very, very technical and correct in the way that you're teaching it. Because if you teach a skill wrong, you can open a child up to injuries later on in life.
You know what I could tell you even now as a practitioner, and a lot of people really don't know what sports psychologists do, and I joke about it because I said, if you know everything that I do, then I'm not a good psychologist. Because if you're guided by ethics, confidentiality is one of the first things that you must hold on to, particularly with your client work. But the skill of concentration, right? And one would say, yes, you have to go into an exam and concentrate to, remember your digits and to write your composition and stuff. But when we think about the concentration that is required in a penalty shootout, in hockey, in football, when we think about batsmen scoring triple centuries, the amount of concentration that is required to continue to focus on ball after ball, and something that I always teach, particularly in the sport of cricket, if you want to get to a century, focus on the first 10 runs. After you get the first 10
10
runs,
runs.
focus on the next 10 runs. So you break down your innings in tens.
Mhm.
And even further than that, every ball is a new ball. Regardless of what happens to that ball, focus on the next one, Don't ever get too far ahead of yourself. Don't think 100, think tens. So for persons to even grasp those concepts, and I'd say even in schools, that have not gotten the shine that they would have needed, if the government is serious about educational transformation, go into the schools and to understand how these children learn, what they want to learn, what are they interested in. Every child is not interested in maths
That's
and
in
English.
That is true.
You understand?
That is
And
true.
it is something that was sold to our generation, particularly in terms of, a graduate in every household. And I loved it because at the time it was something that was needed. But no, with a graduate in every household, there are no employment opportunities, for these graduates in every household. I think that we have to focus now on our learners. I think we need to learn from our children. And I think now when it comes to even considering educational transformation, how do we bring out the best in our children, even if it is not reading and writing? You
Now, I can
understand?
answer. You're a sports psychologist,
Mhm.
right? Now, I can ask a question.
Mhm.
Skills. I want you to obviously give some percentages.
Mhm.
Skills
Mhm.
and mental aspects.
Yeah.
How would you?
Everyone says that sport is 99% mental. I won't say it's 100%. Just because for me, you don't do anything without thinking.
Well,
Unless you're harebrained and you're literally, not, you're just operating
Yes,
flighty.
I can support you on there, I can
Every,
support you there.
yeah,
Yes, I can support
everything
you.
is everything is
It's
a thought
meant. Yes, it's
process.
a thought
Listen,
process.
everybody trains down, not to interrupt, but everybody's training. Everybody's running 150s. Everybody's doing stars. But you see,
Yeah.
on that competition day, the person who is mentally tough,
Mhm.
the person who turns out to be the
Yeah,
winner.
people say 99% mental, 1% physical.
Yeah,
I
no,
say 100% mental, and
I believe
the
that.
physical comes as a result of that.
have the
Focus
mental,
on the mental capacity,
side of it. Yes.
now I saw something a couple years ago, right? I saw something a couple years ago, and it's something I didn't see when I was actually going to school,
Mm-hmm.
right? I just want to know what is actually going on in schools because
Mm-hmm.
the schools usually would field 11 players, and
Mm-hmm.
then you would have a couple boys being subs or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
That on that particular day, that particular match,
Mm-hmm.
they could not field 11 players at
Mm-hmm.
all. So I just want to know, if there's any insight, I think Mr. Babb or Don can give insight what is going on with sports in schools.
I could give a classic example. And I will call the name of the school because the school is in desperate need of a PE teacher. I'm a para school, and I don't know why teachers are staying away of physical education teachers, but I think the
I
school is
think,
right.
John, let me stop you there. I think that somebody is there.
No,
Yes, I think somebody is there. I would
sorry,
tell
I
you.
meant in terms of cricket. Sorry, the
Okay,
opportunity
go ahead. Yes.
existed for
Yes.
a
Okay.
coach to go and develop the cricket program, and I think people are, trying to shy away from it. But I see it as the biggest challenge right now. Fielding a team of 11 of those students. Back to your question, children just are not interested in sport because the truth is parents don't have the monies to invest like before. So imagine your child being asked to stay after school for 2 hours, say school ends at 3 and you got a coach for 2 hours. Bus service is poor. Say that parent doesn't have a vehicle. That child has to catch two buses, worst case from St. James to St. Joseph. We hope it's not that bad. What time will that child get home?
Of course.
So again, because there is no real buy-in, there's no real serious kind of discussion about sport at the national level. These things change when governments make these things priorities. What does a child staying after school to play cricket? What's the long-term benefit of the playing cricket for that child? Yeah, it could go on to play national cricket, but we already know some of the stigma and discrimination that occurs at the selective level across sport in the country.
Politics.
Yeah, a lot of
A lot
politics,
of politics, yeah.
some parents just don't see it as beneficial to their child's development, unfortunately.
But Mr. Babb, I can actually ask you the same question. I know you're
Right.
very closely with schools as well too.
Yes.
Some schools can't field 11 players. What is going on?
Because as Don said, I'm suffering with not only cricket or 11 players in cricket, but with track and field, and it's because the bus service is not adequate enough. There's no plan within schools to service those athletes who stay after school and to get home in areas that are out the way. So therefore, they have to go home as soon as the school finishes around 2:40, 3 o'clock. They have to leave because of where they live. So you may be losing your best potential in cricket, football, because especially in the newer secondary schools. I knew of a situation where I had two children, and one at Leicester Bond School and the other one another place. The other person, older secondary school, picked up hand, waited on evening, and the other one at my school had to fend for themselves. And that is what is happening. So I am saying that is why you see the schools like, especially in BSAP, you will see the schools like the St. Michael School, the older secondary schools, it's coming to the top because drive up there at evening and the children are practicing and their parents or guardians are waiting until they're finished. At my school, that doesn't happen.
But Bob, remember we did something fantastic in 2015 and 2016, when Leicester won, we made history, so don't
Yes.
discount the work that we put in this Democratic Labour Party. So you even spoke about older and newer secondary schools, but look
right.
at how Leicester turned things around under our care for those 2 years.
Yes.
Look at what we did with those children, So I think it is all about staffing. It is all about having the quality teachers that are willing to go the extra mile to ensure that the children are having a fulfilling experience. I know in those years that we were there, we made sure that the initiatives were sponsored. I did a bit of the mental skills education as well, motivating the students and getting them to buy into this culture that we were trying to develop at the time at the school. But it was really our efforts as a collective department, well, not department, as a collective group,
Yes.
that really, really saw that transformation at Leicester Bond. And I think even though I've gone on and some of the others have gone on, you have still stayed and you've still tried your best because
Yes.
resources are a lot more limited now.
No,
I
much
do
more.
feel that, there can be a resurgence again of this excellence, this sporting excellence with the right people in place.
Agreed.
I totally agree. So, Fanus, I mean, you have a situation where we talked about schools and sports, right? You're a parent. Would you encourage your child at this environment to just concentrate on some sports in Barbados? Cricket. Let's take cricket. With the way how the economy is going and how expensive as Don would have mentioned, cricket gear is extremely expensive.
Yes, it is.
Would you encourage your young one, obviously, to partake in sport full time?
Yeah, but it for me, I will cater to my child's strength, and me being if I was a parent, even though I joke that I am one, but I'm not really not. I do have children under my, I guess I would say under my wing, who call me daddy, but really and truly, I would encourage them to play to their strengths. If they want to get into sports, obviously, we as parents would try to sacrifice once we see the direction of where our child wants to go, because we want to cater and foster that young mind to develop into the wholesome being that they can be.
Yeah.
Sadly, not all parents see it that way, because they might probably prioritize putting food on the table first rather than spending on sports gear. So then now we have to ask ourselves, how do we then make it easier for parents to get their children into sports? Do we have to find some way to get parents to buy into the holistic development of sports, and then in a sense now help them to subsidize that sports along with paying their bills and paying their taxes and putting food on the table.
I'm laughing because
Yeah, because I was excited to ask you that question.
Mhm.
I am extra excited to ask you.
I was gonna say,
Extra excited.
you know, as a parent, and it's funny because I think that perhaps I do use my expertise a little bit in trying to tailor my care for Aurora. That's my daughter. So I look at a lot of the research, particularly in terms of early sport development, early skills development. So right now she would be in the sampling years of sport. So sampling between 4 to 7 years, you know, you give them as much things to try to see if they pick up on anything. And both her father and I were former athletes, and I think we think it mishy a little bit, you know, in terms of where we thought she would have been, particularly in terms of the track. So she is in a program. I don't want to call the name of the program, lest people think it's political, but she's in a program with very young children running, and she participates in track and field 3 days a week. And some evenings she gets in the car and she says, I don't want to track no more. Why you don't want to track? I'm tired.
It's
My
hard.
legs will be hurting, you know.
Yeah.
But then when she gets there on evenings and she sees the other children, she's ready to go again. We sampled swimming before. We're gonna be sampling dance next term. And we've taken the conscious decision, whatever she says she likes, that's what she's gonna stick with, you know. She happens to like art, so we will keep going with the art. But I don't think, even as a person who pushes a sport agenda, when it comes to children, same thing I said before, we have to focus on what our learners like, what they want, and what they will excel at. So even if Aurora does not become an athlete, it doesn't bother me, you know? My love for sports will never change, nor will my love for sports allow me to force my daughter to do something she doesn't want to do. But as a parent, no, I do feel that every child deserves the opportunity to sample at least one sport at the
Yeah.
primary school level in this country to decide whether or not sport is for them. And I think both Babb and I can agree when we think about physical education at the secondary level and the dropout of girls in particular, in terms of physical education, I believe that if our children are exposed to sport and physical activity early on, this will be sports that they like and that they want to engage in. Perhaps there will be more of a perhaps steady numbers of participation going into secondary school, where then we use those levels of participation now to identify talent. And I could go on further into saying how we intend to, as a party, develop sport at the performance level, you know, seeding through the school system. But I guess the Barbados Labour Party will have to wait on our manifesto for that at this point in time. But more specifically, I think, you know, I view it differently as a professional than I would as a parent. But all children have the right to at least sample a sport and to choose which sport that they may potentially love.
Especially in that young experimental age, when you find them from toddler going up probably to adolescence. You know, you want to create a space where that sport ain't just making sport. It ain't just going up there and play with a little softball, and you know, there's a serious discussion that needs to be had with physical education teachers, stakeholders, sports enthusiasts, everyone that is involved in sports. How do we develop sports from the ground up? And take those ideas and listen to teachers, listen to PE teachers, because I don't think people really understand how grueling, especially that program at BCC, the Barbados Community College, that program itself, that associate degree program is grueling. And you earn 86 credits. You not only do theory, practicum, you do teaching, you do coaching, you do kinesiology. You have to learn all sets of sports. And
Fanus, you might not like the comment I can make because I don't even know if I like the way you describe the program. I want to always say, and I know some people may say, oh, Damien, that's not so true. I do think we make education in the Caribbean very hard.
Yeah.
Yes, it's
We may
true.
earn a degree very hard.
It's very
We may earn in anything to make ourselves better very hard.
Very
I think
hard, yes.
culturally, as a people, it feels as if we like to see people stay down.
Yeah.
There is no reason why you should be describing a physical education program as grueling.
True.
I think it should be wholesome. It should be engaging. It should be thought provoking. You know, it
Exactly.
should not seem as if
You
you're
want to go back.
to get a qualification.
So you're saying
And
smart and not hard.
I'm saying that some of our academics, even though in this space, probably don't even want to see other academics come through. So they get to the top of the ladder, they kick it down. You know, I've learned everything. I don't want you learning and competing with me. So let me set this paper that you can't pass. I have seen it culturally.
Very,
Yeah,
very
honestly, culturally, I do feel as if, you know, when it comes to education and sport education, particularly, we know a lot of administrators who have been around for decades who refuse to vacate their positions to let younger blood come through. And I'm not even just going to speak to youth, you know, because experience matters. You know, we have people who have traveled the world learning and developing their skills who will never get an opportunity to play their trade in this country because somebody has chosen to keep a door closed and keep everything for themselves, you know.
Stumbling blocks.
And we could
Stumbling
continue
blocks.
this for hours.
For hours, yes, that's true.
On and on and on and on.
And Mr. Babb, I'm going to pose this question to you, but first I want to acknowledge obviously the viewers and their comments. Esther Blue, big it yourself. Sports help with obesity in school. Remember you mentioned wellness.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So this agenda is so cross-cutting, right? And I will give away to Babb now because I was also gonna say, you know, you have been at the butt of some political victimization recently, and I don't think people understood how that kind of extended to your coaching and, you know, your roles, for the influence that you have had in track and field and netball in this country. There is no way that you should be overlooked for opportunities just because of political affiliation. Yes. So even in terms of being affiliated with this Democratic Labour Party, and I've been told, even as I came back home, you know, I want to work with you, but my board doesn't. And why doesn't your board want to work with Dawn Marie Armstrong? Oh, because you're a candidate for the Democratic Labour Party. Oh, well, that's not going to change. You know what I mean? So here we have, you know, a wealth of expertise, you know, connections that could be made, but we're not going to work with you because you're a candidate for the Democratic Labour Party. But the Democratic Labour Party has made me the woman that I am.
I will let the best.
I will never step aside from this party just because people believe, oh, you're on the wrong side. I am right where I am supposed to be. And these discussions really helped me to see, you know, how far the Democratic Labour Party will take this country and will take sport in the long run.
I will let the best of the best.
Yeah, boy.
You know, I would let the best of the best.
Yeah,
We need to take politics out of sports and education.
Yeah,
Seriously,
honestly.
we need to. Yeah.
I could tell you.
Yeah.
Obviously, to move forward in a good way. Mr. Babb,
Yes, please.
I want to play sports. I just come out of school. I want to play sports full time. What are your thoughts on that, Mr. Babb? In this environment, in this economic environment.
You can't. Sorry, Babb.
Listen,
The
the first thing your parents are going to tell you. The first, I really understand your parents are going to tell you, look, going up for some work, yeah.
Yeah, you
want
want to be an athlete. These bills don't run.
Wow.
You can't run from these bills.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, your parents that stop you in your tracks. No, I ain't saying you school to get an education to go play in the sport.
Yeah.
Because what they have seen, and this is the approach. And whenever they come through the stadium, at the airport, and we have these peoples in their big jackets coming to greet you. But you know, in the lead up, you don't get any support, you know.
Nothing.
You don't know that the athlete has no shoes.
Mhm.
You don't know that the athlete can't get to training.
You don't know when
know
they don't have food to eat.
That is it. But then they turn up at the airport for 40 moments. That And usually as a coach who travels, I tend to go in the background because my mouth will get me in trouble at
Yeah.
sometimes. But we have this part-time approach to sport in Barbados and expect world class, full-time and world class
Amazing.
results.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Performance results.
Get
Yeah.
it? A gold medal in any sport is a planned cycle.
Hmm.
4 years to the world champ. No, it's every 2 years. 4 years to the Olympics. You have
Yeah.
to map that path, and it costs money every step of the way where you want to be, and the investment is large. So therefore, we have to. If we are still struggling with trying to get that elusive Olympic medal,
Mm-hmm.
and we are not planning properly for it. We're talking about it, but we're
Yeah.
not planning for it, and we have to plan for that.
You
Yeah.
want you
Okay, go ahead.
sorry,
Go ahead,
I
go
was
ahead.
gonna say you want to know something interesting. And I've seen the public support for Sade Williams, like Peter off, in these past months. And
Yeah.
something that just came to mind, why can't we have like a big television somewhere in town or, somewhere at Warren's that every time Sade is about to run, people can watch,
Great.
because that's our gold medal prospect at this stage.
Yeah.
We have to have some level of continuity. It can't be less support her when she's in a final or less support her when it looks like she's going to medal. Let's support her all the
All
time.
the time, yes.
And it is so simple to create a culture of sport performance more than it is to create a culture of sport development.
True. It's true.
Because you can't see the sport development, the benefits of the sport for development and sport development could be seen potentially in a 5 to 10 year span. We could only know the legacy impact of cricket, the Cricket World Cup, if any, when we
Yes.
see younger children deciding, well, I want to play cricket for Barbados, But when it comes to the short term benefits of capitalizing on the exposure that Sade has gained and has given us as a country,
Can't pay
I
for it.
think we should be watching her each time she runs. I think it's government's responsibility to let people know, not just allow square in the paper, Williams to compete, Make it a public announcement that, our potential gold medalist is performing at XYZ time, stay tuned. And people that want to watch could then go to Warren's, could go to Sheraton, could go to any of these key areas that are accessible, publicly and privately, build a relationship with the Globe Driving, for example. And if she's running, have them show the race on the screen and people go in and support her, make a fanfare of it. So you mentioned the fanfare being after. So this is one way the government could actually try to give some kind of, what I would say, some kind of motivation, some kind of fan engagement at least, leading up to the Olympic Games and supporting Sade in that way. I just find everything is too hot and cold with performance support, and we just don't know how to capitalize on getting our people to buy into sport.
Yes,
We are
right.
patriotic people.
It's
We
true.
are. People will put on the blue and yellow, just like the Commonwealths. Well, not me, but when a Commonwealth driving a car, because you see the tie right there,
Yep.
in the windshield.
It's true.
I
It's true.
just think that this government keeps missing moments. And as a government that came in boasting to know everything and to do everything, I could safely say that I haven't seen them done anything substantial in sport.
You know what was interesting? You mentioned part-time sport.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I've witnessed a couple clubs, the league clubs.
Yeah.
He stirs concrete and he has to take off his come to practice. He comes to practice about 4:30, 5 o'clock.
Because he's working, yeah.
Good. He has to take a bath and then he would need to then practice after that. That is very unfortunate. And as Damien told, he said making sport at sport. Basically, I think we need to really look at you mentioned a lot of times semi-pro or a pro setup in Barbados. I mean, you want to elaborate a little bit on that? Where that is.
I think it's so easy. I said it a year ago. You could enact a semi-professional league right now. If the BCA wanted, they could then announce we starting to pay players from the next round. Cricket is on a break right now. If the BCA had to come in the paper tomorrow and say we paying players at the start of the next round, that's semi-professional as it is, you know. The volleyball season, I think it just concluded. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but if we want to make volleyball semi-professional, the government just needs to give the Volleyball Association a lump sum investment, pay the volleyball players, work out the bare minimum, $50-$70 a game, $50-$75 a game, $100 a game. You know, as long as there is an exchange of money for the display of that sporting talent, it is semi-professional. It is no longer amateur. What the Democratic Labour Party is asking this Barbados Labour Party government is to at least start somewhere. At least start somewhere. In an economy now that is stifled, where there is little money being spent, having another spender come onto the market could actually drive economic activity too, you know. And these are the things that I would love to hear from the economists, from the consultants within sport, within finance, in this Barbados Labour Party government. But everybody is mum. I don't know if they don't understand that there is a sector of economics designated specifically for sport, but there is something called sports economics. And I think this government needs to do their research and actually understand that by injecting a lump sum of cash into an underdeveloped sector, what you do is that you diversify the economy, plain and simple. And I don't need to do an economics degree to know that.
You think it's priority wise, or is it an economic challenge? What do you think, Dawn?
I won't call myself a conspiracy theorist, but I knew I grew up hearing as a girl that when the Barbados Labour Party is in power, the majority suffer. When the Democratic Labour Party is in power, everything is spread equally. By not investing in sport, I could only believe that this stereotype is being further perpetuated, because we know that the mass persons that participate in sport come from the working class.
It's true.
You already see participation in certain sports, so people will call the money sports, the archery, you know, the windsurfing and stuff. We know it's a certain demographic that participates in that sport because they can afford to participate in those sports. Any person from a working class background that has the opportunity in it to excel in what I would call, I don't want to say upper middle class sport or high value sport, but we know that some sports carry more prestige than other sports, right?
Yeah.
I would say for a fact that if we are literally wondering if the Barbados Labour Party is focusing on the masses, I think the masses will benefit from a cash injection in sport, and it may be the Barbados Labour Party mission, maybe their mandate to starve the masses of anything substantial, just because of the empowerment that can come through sport. I could tell you now that if there's an investment in sport and communities like Eden Lodge had the opportunity to host their own tournaments and get their young people involved, crime would come down. Killings would stop. Why the young men ain't got no time to be shooting or fighting? Everybody gonna be playing football. You got a problem with me, tackle me on the field. You got a problem with me, see if you could get my stumps laid down. You know, I've had these discussions, and the young men want something positive to do. They're full of energy, and there's no outlet for that energy. You know,
you were peeping at what I was going to ask next. But before I do that, I could just ask, I could just read Joshua Strong on sports need to get back in the community. Okay, but we are gonna address that. Sports and crime. How can sports be used to reduce crime?
It gives someone another option other than picking up a gun, basically.
Unless you're a shooter.
Unless
you're a shooter.
We need to get back to how we can capture the mind of our youth, right? Because right now we're losing the battle for their minds. It seems that picking up a gun and engaging in illicit activity, crime, is more attractive than actually engaging in something worthwhile like sports. And that we have to find ways to capture those minds, show them the benefit of trying to, as Dawn said, tackle me on the field, lick down my stumps, you know. because it seems like the notoriety now of because when we see the videos where they're being walked out of this the courts now, and they have their friends out and they're hailing them. It
Free
seems
my
like
guy.
it seems like that is more attractive than coming through an airport with a medal around your neck. And I don't know where that why that break out about. I mean, I could say it, right? I could say it, but I don't want to engage in attacking any particular persons or administrations at this point in time.
Okay.
Right? But I will say that there has been a failure in regards to our youth.
Oh, you can talk freely.
Yeah, speak freely, because
Definitely.
they never cease to attack the Democratic Labour Party. As a matter of fact, everything from 2008 to 2018 was the worst thing that happened in Barbados, but Barbados was still better off then.
But
So feel free to speak freely.
I want to say about that very same period as they talk about 2008 to 2018. There was an investment in our youth
across the country.
Across the board.
There were programs in almost every community, I could tell you for a fact.
And when this Barbados-led administration this party, when they came into power, they made promises that they have failed to keep.
And a lot of those programs stopped.
Right, and they stopped the Defense for Sports program, which was another semi-professional program that paid athletes.
One of the only in the country.
One of the only in the country that as I tell people, I will always talk. It broke my heart when they ceased that program because
ceased the funding.
One of the head reasons, and I don't even know if Mr. Alwyn Babb remember this. I was still in Freedom Straders when I actually joined the sports program. Me and you had a conversation, and I told you, well, sir, I want to get my CXCs. I'm still working. I was actually doing a labor job, and I was trying to change. And I told him, well, sir, I got an invitation to get into the sports program, and I can do all of those things in there, and it'd be easy on me. And Mr. Babb told me to go. He said, boy, go on ahead. He told, and I don't even know if you remember that conversation, Babb. I had a conversation with you, and you told me to go, right? And there's sometimes other people might feel bad about losing the afternoon. Say, nah, don't go along. We use it, But Mr. Babb told me to go. He told me to go, and look at where I am now.
It's funny because you mentioned, 2018, the ending of the BDF sports program, but look how 7 years later the National Sports Council is being disbanded. They could call it whatever rebrand they want. And I've said it previously. They've constructively dismissed the workforce, let people know, well, your jobs aren't sure, so we don't know what can happen right now. So why is it that sport seems to be under attack? Why? So they haven't invested anything, but they're taking everything away from sport.
Because they don't see the value in it.
Right.
If they really, the only time they probably saw the value in it was when the cricket World Cup was being hosted here, and they spent money then. And then now you actually see that there's this influx of cash now into sporting, into sporting facilities and so
because
on.
the Democratic Labour Party talking about it.
Right, but I think that there's something.
You got them on the toes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think there's something more nefarious behind that. I think that if you really keep your ears to the ground, there's something else coming around the corner. And I think that we should be mindful of that. That money is only spent when this particular event is coming around the corner.
Fanus, look, I know you're new to this thing, man. If elections come in, totally things, man. The cancer praise you place. You understand what it was not election then.
I don't know. It's a big secret.
No, anything is possible, man. It could be tomorrow. We don't know.
All I think that is it.
Right? But I just want to say that we start with the Barbados Defense Force.
Yeah, definitely.
At least make that investment.
Because the reality is, you come out of school and you're paid, you're given a stipend for something you enjoy doing.
And the discipline it's in a disciplined environment as well.
Of course.
You obviously there are other duties that come along with it during my time, but it didn't hinder me, right? It didn't hinder me. I tell people all the time, I'm the man I am today because of the sports program. I could have been lost, but I went in there with a plan. Even though I told myself I saw very early that even though I was involved in sports, education was my way out.
Yeah.
I wanted we started like yesterday. Not today, not
Yes, but
yesterday.
Yeah, but it's ironic that here we are having a discussion about youth and crime, moving youth away from crime. This government still has not decided what is going to be. If you're not starting the BDF, restarting the BDF program, for
Mhm.
whatever reason, what are you going to replace it by?
Sorry,
But
sorry,
still, you are
sorry, Mr.
wait.
Babb.
Yes.
Sorry. I actually saw an article where they said
Uh,
that they were in talks. How long they were in talks? I'm
Mhm.
not too sure how long they were in talks,
When you
but
say-
it's not good enough.
I reckon that the money from the Prime Minister's Cup could have gone into the BDF sports
Thank you very
program.
much.
You
Thank
know,
very much.
and you know if they are serious about it, but I digress. I'll let you
Go
continue.
ahead. Go ahead.
mhm. Yeah, but if you're having so much concerns, and the question earlier about youth in sport, if I have 100 young persons at my club between the hours of 4 and 6:30, the parents know exactly where they are.
Mm-hmm.
They're not anywhere else. They are there at least
Mhm.
3 days a week. So the sport provides a safety net
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
for those children, especially those children living in communities that may be compromised to some extent. And when they go home, some are so tired they can't even eat the food properly.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
I can tell you.
so they are moving between school, training, studying. So then you start to see that once the involvement in sport gets bigger, then you see the move away from deviant behavior, or the feeling that I have to get involved is something to take up some spare time that I may have. So sports involvement. So if the government is taking like the stadium, I have never seen a, a trap being take so long to put no out really. And every time you raise a question about it, they put pictures in paper about the what is happening there, and it changes every time. But and that's their approach to dealing with sports and youth. When somebody raises a question, we say something, but that has gone on long enough, and we need to call them up on it, and we need to keep them on their toes, as Domris have said, and we have to keep saying to them that sport is important for youth development.
It's extremely important.
Mhm.
And I sound like a stick record, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
But I cannot believe that they scrapped the sports world up to now.
I can't
To be
believe it
honest
either.
with you, I think you heard the figure. It was a measly
1.8.
$1.9 million. That's a drop in the bucket.
That's a drop in the bucket.
Compared to the money
compared to-
this
of
government
course,
has borrowed,
And
of
spent
course.
on consultants.
Come-
compared to
course.
the amount of money
No.
they're collecting in revenue monthly.
$1.9 million.
Mhm.
And they're talking about financial
Mm.
issues. It got to come back. I want to see it back. I want to see it, and I'm asking and telling.
As
I
a
want
matter
to
of fact, I would even throw another idea out to them, because when we consider how localized the BDF sports program is, and this is obviously behind closed doors, at headquarters, what about utilizing it to go into the secondary schools, on evenings, an after school program where you could sell the discipline along with the sport, and then see if some of those same young people can't seed into the mainstream BDF program. That's just one way,
I would say
you
that
know.
how I found out about the sports program
Mhm.
was that Melissa Straker, she was an athlete at the time.
Yeah.
She came up to CP school probably in the mid 90s, right? So
Mm.
there was that there was that outreach at one point in
Mhm.
time.
Yes,
But
they were
that is
recruiting.
that is how I heard about it,
Mm.
and she told me about it when I was probably in third or fourth form,
That's
right?
nice.
Then and it when I came out of school, it never really left my mind. It was just in the back of my mind. But
Yeah.
then I tried to do it the hard way,
Mhm.
getting into sports, getting a salary, and then trying to go to school at O level, still trying to get CXCs at the
Mhm.
same time. And then a friend who was joining said, "Wait, does come and join the sports program?"
Mhm.
And it just came back to me, and I was like, you know what?
Yeah, I think I will make.
Yeah, there's a lot of youth looking at recent, that actually joined these sports programs.
Hmm.
We had a they used to really compete with sports against, and they used to beat everybody all the time.
Yeah,
Every single
we
time.
had national champions. We
You
had
know?
national champions. I think at one point in time, I think the football program had actually they had won the Premier League. I think
Yeah.
at one point in
Of course.
time.
Oh
of
yeah.
course.
Yeah.
Very difficult competitive.
Cricket
Very
was
difficult.
cricket was
Very, very
cricket
difficult.
program was
Cricket
exceptional
was
too.
Very, very
table tennis program was very good too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
we had some very
Some
good
really good coaches.
Yeah.
I remember when Henry Springer ran
Yeah.
the cricket program at the
Yeah,
at the
Henderson
BDF,
Springer,
you know.
yeah.
And we know we could call some of the names that went on to West Indies cricket as
Tony
well
Jones,
from the BDF sports
Tony
program.
Jones
So
was in charge of the athletics program.
yep, most
Yeah.
definitely.
I can
And he
read a
was,
couple.
I think he was an Olympian as well too.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can read a couple more comments here. You got CD. You're correct, Mr. Babb. Simply put, sports is a channel to instill discipline in our children, to school, to training, to home. Tired is all. At Cam Har, I get it to you, Cam. At $80 million a month collected from suicide. What?
$80 million a month.
80
Where did
million
that
a
go?
month. You know,
To improve the country.
they come and they flood my when the videos were posted. Up to now, this government has not provided the receipts to show where this revenue is going. People say, "Oh, look in the estimates." It's not in the estimates.
Okay.
And I implore all Bajans to grab a copy of the estimates, and you will see that there is no allocation for this tax within the estimates for this year. This is 2025 to 2026. I think it is the government's responsibility because you know what, Mr. Bob, some of that money could go to sport. You know, if you're not going to declare exactly where it's going, we challenge the government now to. It's only 1 month if they're collecting 80 million a month. Why we can't? Why sports can't get an 80 million next month and call it a day?
It's true.
So the Democratic Party will start talking about
But
it.
I seen a little comment. It's a little piece of comment. The gathering program. I've not seen the rest of the comment. Yes, I've seen it now. As SW. The
Yeah.
government doesn't have interest in communities being actively involved in sports because that would take away from their gathering. Now that's sending me now on a trip now. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, that's $16 million.
There was a regathering allocation for sport too, you know. So having had the opportunity to peruse the estimates, regathering was mapped onto so many different ministries. But I haven't seen anything related to sports and regathering. So perhaps this is the time for us now to challenge the government to
Is it
show.
still going on? Is it still going on? Where is it now?
Well, the last thing I saw was a small motorcade. You know, they had the celebrities talking on the megaphones, trying to get the people from St. George to come out. And the men from in the rum shot ain't even look wrong. I could tell you they had two pigeons at least they walked picking at some bread and they didn't even look up. That's how we gathering.
But to have so much money
Gathering
invested,
petering out.
but to have so much money invested in something and it's just gone low key.
Because the same thing the same thing we are discussing in this show, right? This government takes no evidence-based approach to anything that they do.
No data.
No data,
Data.
no
None.
information collected. No, it's not a time for anybody to be gathering anywhere outside than a supermarket where the cost of living is reduced and people could get food to put on the table. This government is so disconnected with the hardship that people are enduring in this country that they really can't understand that people do not want to focus on these extracurricular activities unless their basic needs are being met. So regathering is in St. George, and furthermore, they're saying it's a political in St. George because everything can do in St. George North and nothing in St. George South. So I don't have the MPs fighting. I don't have the follow with the Prime Minister. You understand where I'm coming from? I don't even know where it is next month. You know, so
it was not quote unquote hype at the beginning, quote unquote, but then everything is just dissipated. I mean, I haven't been hearing anything about it.
They make it real sport.
Man, when I see the motorcade pass through, I could tell you, even the celebrities at the back of the van they look tired. They didn't want to talk no more. The body didn't want to be speaking to the dead crowd. No, the gathering was a waste of government resources, just like the peace program. You understand where I'm coming from? This government has been misappropriating public funds from the time they took office, and it is sad to see that with the outcry that was had against the Democratic Labour Party administration leading up to 2018, I am disappointed to see our people so quiet now. recognizing the difficulty and the hardship that we are facing as a people. But equally, when you think about it psychologically, when people are oppressed, they hardly speak, you see. So I would hope that in time, this oppression goes from silence to action in a
Yes.
quick hurry.
And they're talking about money. I have within my possession a document, and you know that as I said earlier, there has to be a distinction between PE, the PE teacher, and the coach. And I have in my possession a document which outlines, as part of an educational policy, how you compensate persons who choose to coach after school. I can share it with you at some point in time, Don.
Yeah, no
So,
worry.
all right.
This,
So after
this,
school compensation is important, and and then you have coaches who coach at the national level, and they are given compensation for medals. The gold medal is worth this, and so they are motivated each year, every season. They are motivated to get their athletes focused, to get the program, to learn more, to upgrade themselves, because it means for me as another source of income. So therefore, they're motivated. They are always on their toes. They're always looking for ways where they can improve their program. They're behind the athlete, getting the athlete focused on what we have to do to ensure that at the next Carifta Games, at the next World Championships, we need to do this, and we're working. So I can share that with you at some point in time.
Pedro Gemma, he's asking what at-risk youth, what that means. What makes a child at risk?
So what at risk basically means, and it really stems out to sociology, well, any of the life sciences really, is that a child or a person or an individual may be at risk if they're at risk of harm, endangerment, or any other negative consequences that could come as a result of their circumstances. So one could say now that young people in Eden Lodge are at risk of engaging in deviant behavior, given the rise in gun crime. One could say that the constituents are at risk of being harmed because of the gun violence. So wherever there is a negative consequence that could come as a result of an action or a circumstance, then that individual or that community or a country could be deemed to be at risk, a population even. Just as they say, we as Black people, with the rise in non-communicable diseases in this country, we are deemed to be at risk of contracting, diabetes if we don't reduce the sugar in our diet.
Yes.
If that makes sense, Pedro.
So I want to ask the question of academies. Right? No, you have been overseas. You would have studied overseas. The academies, the work.
I worked in an academy. I worked in one of the best academies.
Tell us a little bit about
Premier League academies, and it is so interesting the way that academies are tiered. So there is you call it the Elite Player Performance Plan, and it is something that's widespread across England. And this is where the football clubs that we've come to know, the Manchester United, Chelsea football clubs, yes, they're Premier League clubs, but their academies are accredited under a different system. So you have Category 1 academies, which are obviously the highest level. You got Cat 2, Cat 3. And each of the academies have to meet a certain standard in order to maintain their award of having their categories, having the category status maintained. So there are certain benchmarks that have to happen, particularly within Category 1 academies. And where I, as a sports psychologist, have benefited from, being involved in the academy, is that sports psychology and mental skills training, there has to be a pillar. Within the FA Four Corner model, there is a pillar for psychological development, and that is how we as sports psychologists are engaged across the Premier League within the UK system. So for me, the benefit of academies is actually giving, national organizations, taking the weight off of them actually to go into the communities and develop sport on their own. You just designate tasks to the different academies. So it gets so complex. And I would venture into cricket a little bit, because one would say in English cricket, certain captains come from certain counties, or the best batsmen come from this particular club, or there's a history of this person collecting the most wickets, or the best bowlers come from this particular region. So culturally, then academies are also influenced at that level, where every single club, every single academy, every single team has its own culture. And it is about creating that melting pot of understanding what works well for that country in that particular sport. And I mentioned England in terms of football, Brazil, France, Italy, they all know what works well for them because they've excelled at the international level for many years. We don't know what works well for us in Barbados. We know that, ever so often an athlete comes out and medals and, we get a silver medal, we get a bronze medal, or, give this athlete a host and land.
Yeah.
But we do not know what the long-term development of that feat looks like because we have never invested in any long-term athletic development. So I always say we missed the moment with Obadele back in 2000. 25 years later, we still do not know what we are doing with sport. And unfortunately, I don't think that the government knows what we are doing with sport either.
But, they always say, there isn't any question that is true, right?
Yeah.
And they can ask the question, is this government serious about sport? Damien?
Not from what you can see.
Uh-huh.
It's 7 years.
Never lose your diplomacy. I like you. Keep that. That's admirable. That's admirable.
As I was saying, no, you cannot say from the evidence that they've been serious. Because I remember their promises was heavily catered to the youth.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were serious about the youth, then you would have been serious about sports.
Yeah.
Because how do you think the Shades and the Obers and how they came through? How do you think they came through to get where they are? At least at some one point in time, a physical education teacher had to touch them in their life. They came through a Babb. Yeah. Ryan Braffett came through a Babb.
Mm-hmm.
You understand?
Carrie Backhouse came through a Babb. Yeah.
Obadele Thompson used to train at Freedom Striders. Mm-hmm. You get me? So if you were serious, then you would have reached out to all of your stakeholders who are involved in sports and come up with a national development plan, not something that is top down, but bottom up. Yeah. You understand? You listen to these people involved, and they tell you what they need, the investment, even if you have to provide concessions to the private sector and tell them, well, listen, if you invest in one particular sport, we provide this particular concession regarding depending on what your need might be, and develop a national program. And I think that is where I'm going to lose my diplomacy now. The DLP can really succeed at.
Yeah.
When we come into government, we put a national plan in progress. We reach out to everyone and tell them, but listen, this is what we want to do, and this is where we want to go. Set up a national program and develop a 4-year, 4 to 4 year program where we can focus on world championships, all world championships, and the Olympics, and get a national program off the ground.
Mr. Babb.
Yes. And what you same question? You're known by your actions, and so far for the last 7 years, we've seen just lip service being paid. So sports, whenever the questions are asked, you see them coming to the paper because about them is optics. So they have to quit the questions by presenting something is probably going to happen. There are no timelines given that are realistic, because you're saying to me it took you 3 years or more to lay a trap. You still have the playing foundation. In 2 years, you're going to get, and 2 years down the road, this is 25. In 3 years, you're going to get these stadiums around the country. It ain't making a sense.
Yeah.
It is not making sense. So I'm saying that they need to do lots more to convince me that this government is really serious about sports and sports development, that the money that they're investing in other areas that they need to say, like, if you're going to give a peace program 5 million and the youth are the future of this country, then I should see a $10 million grant. Simple. So I'm saying that they need to do a lot more than just talking.
Yeah, right. Agreed.
The main serious thing. Yeah, that is submission.
Yeah.
No. Take it away, Don. Let me go, Don. Let me
F
go.
is serious.
Of course, yeah, yeah. Wow.
Leave the best for last.
Of course.
Leave the best for
No,
last.
I'm not.
The
I'm not
joke
gonna be
is,
facetious. I'm not gonna be facetious. No, they're not. They absolutely are not. And I think we've harped on long enough about what they're not doing, and
true.
it would be remiss of me again. We talk about sport, but we haven't mentioned a lot about physical activity.
Yeah.
And I don't want the show to end without us recognizing that every person in every household should really be actively engaging in physical activity for at least 30 minutes per day.
Mhm.
And this is walking to work,
Mhm.
this could be riding a bike, this could be, doing some
Walking,
squats, this
walking
could
in
be just
neighborhoods.
body weight movement, some sand in
Yeah.
a bottle, going to the
Excellent.
going for a swim on a daily basis. So when we mention sport, we can't neglect recreation. And
Yes.
equally, we need to empower each and every individual within the communities across our country to understand why physical activity is important. So the good thing about sport is that sport can be utilized to drive physical activity. So the same thing I mentioned about cycling. And if we wanted to develop a program to target young children or young cyclers, but programs could be actually utilized to target persons within the communities that may be interested in cycling, you know? So we can't neglect physical activity, even though some of the physical activity, and I am knocking the body,
Mhm.
I spend a lot of gyrating and a lot of other movements that were limited to crop over in years past, infiltrating society and schools and different things. But I think we also need now to reimagine what physical activity may look like and
Yes.
actually tailor physical activity to the needs of persons within the community. So not every person wants to gyrate as a form of physical activity. Some
True.
people will tell you, oh, but I'm religious, so I can't be listening to certain kinds of music. How do we engage the Christian or the Muslim or other persons with other views
Yes.
pertaining to physical activity? I just think our approach again is just one-sided, and well, not our approach, the government's approach, sorry, is one-sided, and lacking the evidence to understand why these facets of sport and physical activity are important at this point in time.
Yeah, and just before we move further on, I just want to say hi and greetings to our family, our DLP family in UK, Canada, and the United States. And happy Juneteenth. Happy Juneteenth. That is the day, that's the day, the 19th of June.
Mm.
That's the day they celebrate and commemorate the ending of slavery in the
Yeah,
United States.
right.
Okay? So
Juneteenth
I just want to
facility.
I just want to give them serious greetings.
Yeah.
No doubt.
No, that's wonderful.
That's
No,
wonderful.
no doubt.
Yeah, man.
And before we go on, once more, the Friends of the Barbados DLP Association Inc. proudly presents Barbados Festival Day, Saturday, the 12th of July 2025, 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Canary Cricket Grounds, Monroe's Cohen Park, East 108th St. Seaview Avenue, Brooklyn, New York. Members of the Democrat Labour Party, they will be there. And also the Democrat Labour Party, friends of the Barbados Democrat Labour Party Association, town hall meeting. They're excited to extend a special invitation to all our members, supporters, and friends in the US, addressed by the political leader, Mr. Ralph Thorne, frank discussion on national and party issues. And there's also a Q&A session as well. Yes, a Q&A session. So as we move forward, what are your final thoughts? Your final thoughts, Mr. Francis?
Bring back the sports program. Bring back the sports program. Invest in sports. Invest in our youth. That is all I'm going to say.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Mm.
And Dr. Dawn Marie,
My
are your
final thought.
yes, what are your final thoughts?
Honestly, I think now is the time for change, and I know every government in waiting says it. But I do feel if we want to see a change in our circumstances in this country, it is time for the government to change. And if we want to see a change in sport and recreation and education, it is time for this Barbados Labour Party government to be changed.
Yeah.
You know, so that's my final word.
Mr. Babb, sir.
Yes, please. My final word is that we have to sow the seeds of national sports development within our school system,
Mhm.
and we have to recognize that the practitioners must be treated with respect at all levels, and they must be compensated for the efforts that they put in daily with our children, because that is where we are going to see the interest and the understanding by parents that this is a way out and a career path. So I just want to see that our nursery is taken care of, and we see the results of taking care of our nursery at the primary and secondary level.
Well, my final thought, bring back
The
the
sports program. Bring back the sports program.
No,
And
no,
make
no,
it
no.
better.
And make it
And make it
Expand
better.
it. Expand it.
Bigger
Bigger
and
better.
better, for
Yeah.
sure.
For sure.
It was an absolute pleasure here tonight, viewers, the LP family. This is the LP TV. Good night to all.
And good night. Good night.
Hey.
Good
Good
night.
night.